Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We continue our discussion here on literary terms. The next few terms have to do with more with poetry, I think. So I thought we would start off with the term stanza. Stanza is it's like a paragraph of poetry, and for example, like over here. So it's a crude way of thinking of like a paragraph. So poems stanza number one means the first paragraph, number two means the second paragraph, and uh, uh, now they can be 2 lines long, first stanza, or 3 lines long here, or over here like 4 lines long. Okay, so that's it, stanza. Now, one of the elements of poetry is repetition. Okay, repetition is used as a rhetorical device, as an idea that repeats, the words that repeats for structure or for sound. If in the poetry, for example, if a whole line repeats, like in the end, like this, okay, so this whole line is being repeated over here. So these two lines are exactly the same, okay? So these are supposed to be the same, and at the end of these stanzas, for example, now this is called a refrain, okay? So this whole line that is repeated, that's called a refrain, okay? And an example is like like that's like a line that repeats, exact same line that repeats. So in this can also occur in poetry, and that's called a refrain. Now, repetition does not have to obviously be of the whole entire line, right? So it can just be repetition can occur in end words giving a certain rhyme. So, for example, if repetition occurs at the end of every line over here, for example, if these words are they're rhyming words over here, okay, and these words are rhyming words over here, like this, okay, you follow what I'm saying? So if there's repetition over here of words, they rhyme like this, okay, that's a rhyme, correct? And so rhyming, the patterns of rhymes, okay, so the rhymes can form patterns like this, okay. So if this is A, one ending, and this would be A, and this would be B, and this would be B. So this pattern would be called like A B A pattern. And if on the other hand, if the pattern was like this, okay, and then there's some different ending over here, this would be like A B B. If you call this A, you call that B. So that would be A B B pattern. These patterns of ending of rhymes, okay, these patterns of ending or end rhymes, they're called rhyme schemes, okay. So these are rhyme schemes, okay. So a poem can be like this, alternating lines rhyming, or consecutive lines rhyming, and these are called rhyme schemes. Now, rhymes themselves can be end rhymes, okay. It means the lines over here at the end, they are rhyming, or they can be rhyming in the middle, right? And the rhymes can be from they can be same words, okay, or end of the words, okay, or they can be same sounds, okay. So, for example, the words bite, okay, and flight, they rhyme. Bite and flight, they spell nothing like each other, but they sound similar. So the rhymes can be from word sounds, or just the ending words, or spelling the words can be the same, okay. So those are just rhymes, okay. So here we're talking of repetition as a rhetorical device. One way of repetition, of course, is rhyme, correct? And another way we talked about is repetition, like refrain, okay? Another form, so refrain and rhymes are forms of repetition as rhetorical. Another way is having a rhythm, okay? Having a rhythm in a poem. For example, I'll give you this particular poem of favorites, right? So, tell me not in mournful number, life is but an empty dream. So it has a certain rhythm, right? It flows. So tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. This rhythm is created by using stressed words and words that are not stressed. So stress, tell me not. So tell me not in mournful numbers, like that. So alternating stress and unstressed patterns, okay? So the rhythm is created by stressed and unstressed, okay, syllables. So stressed and unstressed syllables create the rhythm, okay? And the pattern of rhythm is called a meter. So pattern is called a meter. Now I believe there's a bigger discussion on this, so I don't want to go too much in detail. But when there is stressed or unstressed, so stressed and unstressed syllables, okay, they create a pattern, okay. So and then so there's stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, that's a pattern. Or stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, another pattern. Or stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, like that. So the pattern is called a meter, okay. Pattern is called a meter. And so that's and the rhythm is generated by this pattern, okay, and the meter is given different names, okay. Now, as I said, I think there's a whole section on this stressed and unstressed business, but just to give you an idea of what the big difference is here's an example that you'll appreciate, I think. Now, there's two different ways of pronouncing this, okay? The words that are stressed are usually given that symbol, or syllables that are stressed are given that symbol or this symbol. And unstressed symbols are usually given symbol like this, okay? So there are two ways to pronounce this, okay? Islam, okay? Islam, so Islam, okay? Or you can go Islam, okay? Okay, Islam or Islam. Islam, Islam. You follow? So it does really make a very big difference which syllable is stressed. And as I said, I think we'll talk more about this, but I just wanted to introduce the importance of this. So it's people who are not familiar with the way words are pronounced, they make mistakes in the stresses. So Islam, here the stress is over here, and Islam, the stress is placed over here, making a very big difference in the pronunciation. So, but placing the stress, unstressed in a particular pattern gives poetry prose a certain a rhythm, a pattern that's pleasing. Okay, so all of this is repetition that is used in rhetorically. Examples of repetition is rhyme. Examples of refrain, examples of rhythm created by a certain meter, by stressed and unstressed syllable. There's other ways of repetition, and that is parallelism. So here's another example, parallelism. Now, repetition can be the repetition of same words or phrases. When similar phrases are used, okay, similar phrases are used, that's called parallelism. So I shall try to give you an example here. Okay, here's an example from the beginning words of Tale of Two Cities by Dickens. One of my favorite lines here. Favorite lines of all, one of the most famous favorite lines of all times. Okay, parallelism, similar repetition of similar words or phrases. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was an epoch of incredulity or disbelief. It was a season of light, and it was a season of darkness. It was a spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. Beautiful. And this is an example of repetition of phrases, okay, for rhetorical purposes, and beautifully used over here. So these are all different forms of repetition that are used for rhetorical purposes. Rhyme is one, refrain is one, rhythm is one, stressed and unstressed patterns, and which is called meter, and parallelism is an example of repetition as well. Okay. All right. The last form of repetition is alliteration. I didn't spell that right, did I? I don't have an alliteration. Alliteration. Alliteration is repetition of this initial sounds of words. So if you have a word over here, and if you have a word over here, the initial sounds of the words will be the same, for example. Okay? So starry, and then skies is like an example of it. She walks in beauty, example that's given over here. Okay? And of cloudless climes and starry skies. See? The beginning of cloudless climb and starry skies. That's repetition of the beginning sounds. Okay? And all the best and the dark and bright beginning sounds. So repetition can be occurring in the end, as in rhymes in the beginning, such as in alliteration. Okay? Okay. Some of these other terms that are not necessarily related to this, but some terms that we should be familiar with nevertheless. Diction. Diction is, as in dictionary, diction is the particular use of words or word choices a person has. So his diction is incomprehensible, meaning the vocabulary words that he uses is so difficult to understand. So diction is the use of words or word choice. Okay, I'm going to say word choice. Okay, of a particular author. And then there are other terms such as figures of personification. Okay, personification is a rhetorical device where non-living things are given human characteristics. Okay, for example, nature is very frequently spoken as a person. Her beauty, nature's beauty, is so sublime. She is an everyday brightful shines. So that's like giving calling nature her or she. It's personification of nature. You can personify animals, and right, because animals can talk and have human being characteristics, right? So giving anything that's non-human human qualities is called personification. Okay. Now there are two other terms which are sometimes confused, and metaphors versus similes. I've made enough mistakes with these that finally I think I've gotten these. Okay, metaphors. Both of these are ways to compare two things. Okay, and one equates to one to the other one compares it to the other. Okay, now the example is saying, for example, he is like a giant. Okay, he's like a giant. I mean, you have he is like a giant is a simile. Okay, so this might bring a smile onto somebody's face. He's like a giant. You're describing them. Let me say he is a giant. Okay, he is a giant. Now that's a metaphor when you're equating him to a giant. Okay, so that's a metaphor that might frighten them. He is like a giant means comparing it. that's a simile. So when you're comparing two things with the words such as like, that's a simile. When you're equating them as equal, that is a metaphor. Another example would be his heart is like gold. That's a simile. His heart is gold is a metaphor. He eats like a pig is a simile. He eats a pig is a metaphor. So one might, they're very different. So one is just compares them, one equates them. So this is more like really compare, right? And this one is like equate. Okay, metaphor like equates the two things. They are equal. He is this. This one compares it. So that's a metaphor versus a simile. Okay? And another term that's irony. Irony is, everybody knows irony. Irony is when what is intended or what happens is actually opposite of what it really it means. Okay? So verbal irony, for example, so it can be verbal irony. Okay? Is, for the book gives an example. Lucky me, I lost my car keys. Do they really mean that they're lucky? No, they're being ironic. Okay, the meaning is the opposite. Okay, irony is when opposite meaning is intended. Okay, that's an example of a verbal irony. Okay, and then there's situation irony. Is when you expect something to happen in the story, but something else happens, okay? And then there's dramatic irony, okay? In other words, dramatic irony is when the reader knows something that's opposite of what the character knows. So the character believes somebody else to be true, but the reader knows that that person is false. That's like dramatic irony. Dramatic irony occurs when the audience knows something that the characters do not. Okay, the example given in the book is the 12th Night, Shakespeare's play Twelfth Night, where one of the characters is addresses as a knight, but this is actually a woman. So, but now the reader knows that, but that's opposite of exactly what's happening to everybody else. That's dramatic irony. Most everybody's then familiar with verbal irony, where you mean opposite of what you mean. It's like you meet somebody, somebody's meeting somebody else, then they hate the other person. Says, it is so wonderful to see you. It's like, I mean, they don't mean it. That's ironic. That's irony. They mean it's terrible to meet you. So that's they mean the opposite meaning. Okay, and the last two words I'm going to talk here about is imagery and symbolism. Imagery, I-M-A-G-E, imagery is the visual, like mind's eye picture that an author produces. Okay, imagery is descriptive language that describes the scene for you. And the last word here is symbolism. Symbolism are things that represent ideas. Okay, for example, a story of a bird in a cage might be about a story about freedom and lack thereof. That is symbolism. Okay, and so abstract ideas can be represented by objects with symbolism, such as flags of countries are symbols of what the country stands for, right? And the Statue of Liberty was a symbol of freedom and a welcoming character of our country. So that's symbolism. Okay, all of this that we talked about, rhetorical devices, etc., all combine to give the author a particular style. Style is like the personality of the author that allows them to use all of these different concepts or rhetorical devices in a peculiarly unique way, and that is the particular author's style. So the point that if somebody reads Shakespeare enough, after a while they can spot Shakespeare if they're not even told that that's a Shakespeare, because he's so uniquely himself. And same thing with Dickens or or if somebody reads Sherlock Holmes enough, if they pull a line out of some Sherlock Holmes, think, hey, that's from Sherlock Holmes, even though they may not recur exactly where it is because of a particular style of the author. So all of these rhetorical devices cumulatively give a certain personality to the writing of the author, and you can recognize it when you're able to recognize that. That's known as the author style. And that is, in my appreciation, a brief summary of this discussion on literary terms. Until next time, assalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Assalamu alaikum.